Now you can see the background. You can see the background here is with the picture of Michlelet Shana, the college I teach in up north near Haifa. And I'm happy to be here again with you today to learn something from Parashat HaShavua, Parashat Bereshit, so many things in this parasha. I chose to deal with Cain and Hevel, a very, very famous story. And to try and look at this story through the eyes of a few of our Parashanim, Radak, Rashal Hirsch, Radat Sofman, and all together to try and get a perspective on what exactly happened then, but much more important than what happened, why did it happen? Because the why, I think, has a lot to reflect about life in general throughout any time in history. So we will begin. I'll open the Matzeged here now. I just want to make sure, do you see the title, Am I My Brother's Keeper, and the pictures?
Yeah.
Just tell me.
Yes.
And now do you see a text, a few psukim, or is the title, you see them? Okay, just to make sure that it's moving along. And here, just again, to make sure this red circle, do you see this red circle on the word kaniti?
Yes.
Okay, Mitsuyan. So, well, here. So we will begin here. I wanted to, as I said, wanted to go with Cain and Hevel, the famous line of Cain, am I my brother's keeper? And the subtitle of the shiur is Possessiveness and Relationships. In Hebrew, I called it kinyanut or ksharim, although the word kinyanut, I don't know if it's a real word in Hebrew. I made it up. But we'll see why I made up this word in Hebrew a bit later on. We have here two pictures, and I wanted to begin with these pictures, two pictures of the story of Cain and Hevel. The one on the right is part of a bigger piece of art that has to do with Cain and Hevel. It's only part of it, but this is the part of the murder. And on the left, we have another picture, not part of a creation of art, but a drawing. And in this drawing, I think we see more than just, we don't see the murder, but we see something that the artist is trying to interpret in the psukim. I mean, what he drew here is not only the facts, but he has some interpretation. What is he interpreting? I think what he's trying to do is to solve a problem we're going to deal with. And I want to raise the problem already now, and we'll see soon, but later on, a few different approaches about this question. I'm just closing a window here because there's some noise coming from outside. Just a moment. Okay. So in the story of Cain and Hevel, we have these two brothers, the first brothers in history, the sons of Adam and Chava. We know something about their occupation. We know something about their relationship to God. Both brought menachot, korbanot to Hashem. One was accepted, one was not. And we also know that Cain murdered Hevel. But what is the connection between these three details? One, their occupation, which we'll go into a bit more details right away. Second is the korbanot they brought to Hashem. One was accepted, one wasn't. And third thing is the fact that one murdered the other. What is the connection between these different things? The artist here on the left is clearly trying to say that Cain is jealous of Hevel. He's looking at him with anger, with some bad feelings about him. It has to do with the korban they are bringing, since we see on the left the fire of the korban of Hevel, and on the right we see the pieces of wood of the korban of Cain, which are not on fire. They are not lit, probably, according to the Midrash saying that how do we know that Hashem accepted the mincha of Hevel and not of Cain? Because of the fire that came down from heaven onto the mincha of Cain and not to the mincha of Hevel, not the mincha of Cain. So it seems to be that because of the story of the mincha, he is jealous, and therefore he's going to kill him the next thing. That this is not the only possible interpretation for this relationship between the korbanot and the murdering. Let's go into the story, and we'll see another option. So I want to begin with the first psukim of Perek Daled on the paper in front of you that was sent by mail. We don't have all the psukim. The psukim will be brought here in the matzeget and the presentation. All the commentaries are brought in the presentation and also on the paper. You can hold the Tanakh in front of you in English or in Hebrew and see the psukim that I did not bring here on the piece of paper, but they will be presented here in front of us. So we begin from Perek Dalet, Pasuk Aleph, והאדם ידע את חווה אשתו, ותהר ותלד את קין, ותאמר קניתי איש את השם. Adam and Chava are married. Adam yada in modern Hebrew means knowledge. In Tanakh, lada'at means a very deep connection. It can be a connection with knowledge or a connection between people or a connection between husband and wife. So Adam yada et Chava ishto, and she's pregnant. They have a son born, and she calls him Cain, vatomer kaniti ish et Hashem. Now, what is kaniti? Kaniti, in modern Hebrew and also in many, many places in Tanakh, means to acquire, to buy something. But she did not buy her son. She created her son with Hashem. Et Hashem means with Hashem. Many places in Tanakh, the word et means also im. But the word kaniti, meaning creating, comes up later on in Sefer Bereshit and in other places in Tanakh. Melchizedek Melech Shalem says, Baruch Avram Le'el Elyon Kone Shamayim Va'aretz. What does it mean that Hashem bought heaven and earth? He did not buy them, he created them. So the word liknot, which in our language means to buy something, in Tanakh means maybe to own something. I can own it because I created it, or I own it because I made it, or I bought it. So one translation, as I brought here, is blessed be Abraham to El Elyon, creator of heaven and earth. Another translation I found somewhere else was not creator of heaven and earth, but the possessor of heaven and earth. So liknot can mean to possess, to hold it, or to create it, or to buy it. But in any way, it's mine. Now here Chava calls Cain using the word kaniti. And this is very important, not only to understand the meaning of his name, but what did his mother have in mind, that she had in mind, I'm creating him with Hashem, but this word Cain, as a creator or a possessor, has a lot of meaning for later on in this story. So Cain is born, the first son is born in the world, a creation of man and woman and God. And now, Pasuk Bet, Vatosef laledet et achiv et Havel. Another son is born, his brother, Hevel. Vayi Hevel ho etzon v'Cain haya oved adama. The Torah tells us each one has his own occupation in life, his profession in life. One is ho etzon, he deals with the sheep, with the goats, and the other one works on the land, crops, wheat, he grows everything. Let's continue with the knowledge that one is oved tzon and one is ro'etzon and one oved adama. But here, it's important to see that there's a contrast in the way the Torah writes this down. In the verb lihiyot appears here twice in this sentence. Vayehi hevel ro'etzon v'Cain haya oved adama. Lihiot, to be, tells us about them. But why does the Torah change the way it's written? Once it's Vayehi, and at the second time it's Haya. Many times when we have this difference between two verbs in the sentence, it's trying to contrast the two to each other. I'll give you a clear example for that from a story later on in Bereshit. After Yosef tells his brothers and his father the second dream, we are told, Vayikanu vo echav, ve'aviv shamar et hadavar. His brothers are jealous because of these dreams, but his father shamar et hadavar, meaning his father says, well, this is something to keep in mind. Not to be jealous about, but this is something to keep in mind. I want to have this in mind for later on. These dreams are very interesting and important. Now, Vayikanu, I would have expected that it would say Vayishmo aviv et hadavar. But aviv shamar et hadavar, changing the way the verb is written, is saying there's a contrast between the two. The brothers are jealous. It's anger. It's being against Yosef. Aviv shamar et hadavar is telling us he's not against Yosef. He is with Yosef. He's keeping it in mind. He wants this to happen. He wants this dream to become true. So this is a small issue in Hebrew language of Tanakh, but it means a lot. And here the question is, what is the contrast between Ro'eh Tzon and Oved Adama? Why is a shepherd a contrast to someone who works with agriculture and with a field? I mean, would we say being a doctor is in contrast of being a lawyer or being a businessman? These are two different things. One chose this, one chose that. Why are they one against the other? In order to understand that, I want to look at Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Rashal Hirsch deals with this in length. I read here in Hebrew. We'll read it through with some translation I'll try to give along the way. And he says here something very important, I think, about choosing an occupation for life, choosing a profession. Now, I assume most of us sitting here on this Zoom already chose a profession for life. Many of you are already, after many, many years of being a professional for something. But your children, your grandchildren mostly, are probably choosing to, in these days, what do I want to do for life? So here, Rashal Hirsch gives us a few important insights about choosing a profession for life. And he says the following thing. Hashoni ba'isuk, the difference in occupation, romez al ha'evdelim sheyesh bitchunot nafsham. It hints to us about a difference in which is much deeper about their about the people and about their nefesh. Now, why should the occupation reflect something deep about the soul? And we'll see right away. He just continues and tells us, he says this issue is not only a question of an individual named Cain and his brother named Hevel. This question has to do with the history of many, many nations. And he says there's a contrast between nations who are Ovdei Adama and nations who are Ro'ei Tzon, shepherds. And the choice these two brothers made tells us a lot about this contrast throughout history. I'm skipping to the second paragraph here. עבודת האדמה דורשת את כל כוחותיו הגופניים של האדם. Working with the land, you need a lot of strength. And it takes all the power of the man. הגזרה האלוקית בזיעת אפיך תאכל לחם, which appears earlier in Sefer Bereshit, one chapter before, this גזרה of בזיעת אפיך תאכל לחם, נוגעת בייחוד לחורש בקרקע. The man wants to plow the land. The land is hard. And in order to plow, to break into the land, man needs to totally devote himself for this physical challenge of life. The self-pride and the pride of the property one was able to make, האדמה שהוא הרווה בזיעת אפיו נעשית לו לערך עליון ולחלק של אישיותו. הוא נאחז בה ומתיישב. He says here that the profession a man chooses has a strong influence on the man himself. I remember many years ago, Rabbi Lichtenstein, I had the zchut to learn by him. Rabbi Lichtenstein spoke a lot about education, the importance of going into education, and the importance of dealing with different things that have to do with medicine, whether a doctor or a nurse or anything that has to do with the issue of healing people. And when he spoke about education, he said clearly, this is a great mission that we have for life, to educate the next generation. And when he spoke about being a doctor or nurse or anything that has to do with healing, he spoke about the importance of bringing refuah to the world and also about the human relationship. And it fits very strongly to what Rasha Hirsch says here about what does the occupation do to the person. Hard work needs devotion and a strong connection to what I do. But when the connection is too strong, there's something that doesn't have an inner value on itself. So I'm strongly connected to the work and to what I gain from working. But what about human relationship? What about values? So Rosh Hashanah says you need to know that if you choose to be a Oved Adama, to work in agriculture, you'll be very strongly connected to what you are doing and what you gain out of it. And you maybe have a lot of self-pride for your success, but you're missing something. What are you missing? We'll see in the next paragraph when he talks about the shepherd. Mitzad Sheni, he says, Ma'ala yetera nodat l'chayei haroim. This a great ma'ala for the roim, for the shepherds. רוב עבודת הרועים בעלי חיים, הטיפול בהם מפתח בליבו רגשות אנושיים של חמלה והשתתפות בצער. When a shepherd works with animals, he creates compassion towards the animals. But this compassion does something to the human being himself and to his relationship to people as well. And therefore he says, when one chooses as a profession to be a shepherd, it will influence his soul for life. And the influence is about compassion, about caring for others. He continues here with another few ideas, which we won't go into all the details. But what he does claim here, close to the end of the paragraph, is that also a shepherd has some more time for himself. And when he has time for himself, he has time also for human and divine values. As he says here, close to the end of the paragraph, יש לו פנאי לרומם את רוחו לערכים אלוקיים ואנושיים. The time we have in life for values, whether it's human values or divine values, is something which we need, which is necessary for us. And therefore he says, משום כך היו אבותינו הקדמונים רועי צאן, כפי שהיו משה ודוד. Our ancestors were shepherds because they wanted to develop the compassion and they wanted also the time for extra things, not only for what we need for life, but what we want for life as well. Not only what's necessary for surviving, but also what's necessary for a valuable life, a spiritual life. Now, from this, he says here, this is the difference between Cain and Hevel. And if we go back to the Hebrew, Vayehi Hevel Roetzon v'Cain Haya, not Vayehi Cain, but Cain Haya, this is the way the Tanakh tells us. There's a contrast between the two. These two do not go together. These are two opposites in many ways. He ends the paragraph, ובכן הבל היה רועה צאן קין, המסור כולו לקניינים היה עובד אדמה. Kinyanim are our possessions. He says Cain, the name Cain, Kaniti Ishet Hashem, has to do with what we possess. That's his name. That's his personality. Now, his mother had in mind Cain, meaning I acquired him with Hashem. But later on in life, he takes this name Cain and turns it into someone that is not really connected to Hashem, but much more to his possessions, his kinyan. So this is just the beginning of the story, Psukim Aleph and Bet. And Rashahish said there's so much in these few Psukim. We'll continue now to the tension between the brothers. HaMenachot, the next paragraph, Psukim Gimel up to Zayin, deals with bringing korbanot to Hashem. Vayimiketz Yamim. Years went by. The word Yamim here probably means years, as in other places in Tanakh. Vayave Cain mipri adama mincha l'Hashem. Cain, that we already heard bad things about him, but he is the first one who initiates bringing a korban to Hashem. We'll try to understand right away, why is he the first one initiating that? We would have expected maybe Hevel to be the first one, since Hevel, we saw as a shepherd, has time for divine values. But Cain is the first one who does it. We'll try to understand this right away. The Hevel hevi gamhu. Also Hevel brought mibchorot zono umechelvehen. So Cain brought from Pri Adama, from the fruit of the land, because that's his occupation. And Hevel's occupation, he's a shepherd, so he brought from the bechorot of his son, of the cattle, umechelvehen. Chelven is the fat, from the fat of the sheep or the goats. Vayisha Hashem el Hevel vel minchato vel Cain vel minchato lo sha'a. The word sha'a, vayisha, means to face something. Hashem looked favorably towards Hevel and minchato, but towards Cain and his mincha, lo sha'a. Hashem did not look favorable towards Cain and his mincha. So obviously, Vayichal Cain meod, Vayiplu panav, Cain feels really bad about it. But before we see what happens with Cain, with his bad feelings, the question is why? Cain is the first one bringing a mincha ever to God. What's wrong about it? And we should have something in mind here. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not announce there's a competition, and I'll accept only the best mincha that will be brought to me. There's no competition. Hashem can accept 2 menachot, 3 menachot, 10 menachot, 100 menachot. If Hashem did not accept Cain's mincha, it seems to be, it's not only not as good as the mincha of heaven. Probably there's something really wrong about the mincha of Cain. And the question is, what's so bad about it? He brought me pri hadama. He brought fruit from the land. I mean, it's fruit that he grew. He worked to get to bring it. It seems to be. Well, what's so bad about it? I want to see the Radak, Rav David Kimchi, and he points out two important differences between these two sacrifices to Hashem. Radak on Pasuk Gimel says, "Mipri ha'adama," from the fruit of the land. Velo zachar me'eze pri. He says it's not mentioned in the Pasuk which fruit was brought, meaning not whether it's an apple or a tomato, but whether was the quality of this fruit. He says it seems to be that he brought from the least of his fruit. Or achar she'achal hu hevi min hanotar lefanav. Another possibility is that after he ate from his food, only then he brought to Hashem. Only after he ate his. Now, how did Radak reach the conclusion that it's the least, and it's only after he ate his own? He will say that right away. He did not bring the Bechor, the firstborn, the first fruit. כי מביא, היה אומר, כמו שאמר בהבל, לפיכך לא נתקבל קורבנו. He says, when we read about the Mincha of Hevel in Pasuk Dalet, it says he brought mi bechorot zon, for the firstborn of his animals. It doesn't say that Cain brought the first fruit, the bikurim of his fruit. So he did not bring the first ones. So that's one difference. But another thing is, mechel vehen, from their fats. I mean, he focuses on the mipnei adama, that does not include two components, not the bechor and not the chelev, the fat. That's what he says on Pasuk Dalet. Mibchorot zono mechelven, ze v'derech kavod. Cain brought something, Hevel brought with honor to Hashem, with kavod. Hevi me'abechorot kodem sheyenehu me'anoladim. The firstborns immediately to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Only after some more were born, he took those were born later on. But the first ones are brought to Hashem. So if only by Hevel it's the firstborn, I understand that by Cain, it's not the first ones. The first ones, Cain ate. After eating the first, he brought the next and the least. How do we know it's the least? Because it does not say mechel vehen, the fat of them. So Radak points out two things here. I want to add a third difference between these two menachot. Sono. By Hevel it says he brought from his son, sheep or goats, from his. It doesn't say by Cain, mi perotav, from his fruit, but mi pre ha'adama. It seems to be that Cain brought a mincha which is not what he grew, but it is what grew in the land on its own. Now, we're here gathering more and more differences between these two menachot. And Radak says this leads to the next step. Vayisha Hashem el Hevel ve'el minchato. HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks at, he faces Hevel and Minchato. And Radak says here, Haya retzon ha'el el Hevel, ki ra'a kavanato atova. וכן היה רצונו אל מנחתו שהייתה מכובדת וראויה להקריב. It says Hashem faced two things, Hevel uminchato. Hevel had a good will, a good intention, and also the mincha is a good mincha. Ve'el Cain v'minchato lo Hashem did not accept, did not face the mincha of Cain. Why? לא היה רצון האל אל קין, כי לא הייתה כוונתו טובה. The intention of Cain wasn't good, therefore Hashem did not want him. וכן לא היה רצונו אל מנחתו כי בזויה הייתה. Hashem did not even want his mincha because it was bazui, it was vile. Now, there's something that Radak says here that we'll see right away later on, that Radat Hoffman goes much deeper into it, and I want to say already now what Radat Hoffman says about this point, because it's really important to understand Radak through that. We are not told here that one korban was accepted and one was not accepted. We're told one person was accepted and also his mincha, while the other person and the mincha of the other person was not accepted. We're focusing about the people, and Radak says there's a difference with their intention. It's not only a difference in the korban, but there's a different intention here. Now, where do we see something about the intention? That's not mentioned in the psukim here. The psukim say nothing about what people had in mind. The psukim talk about what they did. And here I want to see Radat Hoffman, because Radat Hoffman says that focusing on what people do, we can understand their intentions. And here, Radat Sofman, not on Sefer Bereshit, but on Sefer Vayikra, teaches us something we think very interesting. Radat Sofman on Sefer Vayikra, when he deals with Korbanot, with Korban Mincha, he tries to explain the meaning of the word Mincha. And he says, the first Korbanot ever were brought by Cain and Hevel, and the Torah calls them Mincha, not a sacrifice, but a Mincha. Now, what is the meaning of the word Mincha? And he says here, the second line of the Hebrew here, between Mincha urato b'chol makom shu nimtza b'mikra, matana shemugeshet legadol b'ma'ala u'bekoach. Now that's what man says. There are a few different words in Tanakh for a gift. In modern Hebrew, we usually use the word matana as a gift. In Tanakh, we find the word matana, we find the word mas'et, and we find the word mincha. Mincha is not only a korban between man and Hashem, it's also a gift people give to other people. And what that's what one says, that when we look through our Tanakh and we try to understand what's the difference between mincha, matana, mas'et, three different words for a gift. He says, and here we're focusing only about the word mincha, not about mas'et and matana, but the word mincha is something that the weak person gives to someone who's greater than him. Can be greater because he has a greater power, or maybe he is in a greater position. And since he is greater, the weaker, the less important person gives a gift to the important person. A good example for that is when the brothers of Yosef go down to Egypt in the second time. After the first time, they got into trouble there, and Shimon is in jail, and they need to come now with Binyamin to Yosef and to release Shimon from jail. They are the weak people in that story, obviously. The 10 brothers are very weak, and now also Binyamin is with them. They are 11. One is in jail, Shimon, but altogether now in Egypt, 11 brothers are standing in front of Yosef. Yosef is the powerful leader of Egypt. He's the Mishneh LaMelech. And they bring him a mincha. That's what appears in Parashat Miketz. So the mincha there is clearly brought from the weak people to the greater person, to the Mishneh LaMelech. And that's what man says. The same thing is when people bring a mincha to Hashem, it's the weak towards the powerful. But he says it can be done in two different ways. One way can be with a lot of fear. The other option is not fear, but awe. In Hebrew, we use the word yira'ah for fear and for awe. But it's obviously two different feelings. Both of them are the weak towards the powerful, but very different feelings. So what that Hoffman says, and I won't read the Hebrew here, I'm explaining it immediately in English. What he says is, these are two options. One option is that the weak one feels in front of the powerful one, I'm nothing. He's so powerful. I'm afraid of him. Okay, that's what the brothers of Yosef felt in front of Yosef. They are afraid of him. He's the leader of Egypt. You must make sure that he's going to accept our gift and he's going to release us and sell us some more food so we won't die from hunger. There's so much fear in that story. So when they bring the mincha to Yosef, that is a mincha which they say, okay, now Yosef, take our gift and please have some compassion towards us. A lot of fear. The other option can be not fear, but awe, the feeling of, wow, I'm standing in front of someone so powerful. I want to give him something, to express my feelings towards him, to express my understanding of how powerful he is, and I'm here. I want some compassion, not because of fear, but because I know I depend upon him. And when Cain and Hevel are bringing a mincha to Hashem, that's often says there's a huge difference in their intention. Cain is afraid of God. And since he's afraid, he's the first one to jump ahead and bring something to God. because the fear leads us to move so fast in life. When we're afraid of something, we're very fast to, what can I do in order to get away this thing which might hurt me, might harm me. So Cain is the first one who jumps ahead. He brings a korban to Hashem, trying to say basically, God, take this fruit and leave me alone. You created the world. You control everything. I'm afraid of you. So take this and leave me alone. I'm afraid. But Hevel has something totally different in mind. What he has in mind is, wow, God's created the world. I depend upon him. I want to reflect my feelings towards him. And how do I express my feelings towards Hashem? I want to give him something. Now, what do I give him? Oh, I'll give him the best. He deserves the best. And I'll give him the firstborns, because without him, I won't have anything. So obviously, he deserves the firstborn, and he deserves the chelvehen, the fat. And it's from sono, from what I worked so hard to receive. But I worked hard, but without siyata dishmaya, I would not have had anything. So the first that I worked hard to get, I give it to Hashem. Whatever is left, I'll take to myself. But the first is to Hashem. And therefore, Hadat Sofman says, Vayisha Hashem el Hevel ve'el minchato. Hashem first of all looks at Hevel and says, Hevel, wow. He has the right feeling in mind about relationship of God and man. Whoa, not fear. Whoa. I'm facing heaven now and his mincha, because his mincha is a reflection of his intentions. First of all, Cain. Hashem says, Cain? He's afraid. What is he afraid of? Why is he giving the least mincha? Because it's just saying, God, take something and leave me alone. No, Hashem says, no, this is not the right relationship. It's not that the mincha of Cain is not as good as the mincha of Hevel. The mincha of Cain is terrible. This is the wrong relationship of man and God. Hashem cannot accept this mincha. So, Vayisha Hashem el Hevel ve'el minchato. First of all, Hevel, and then his mincha. But Cain, no, Hashem cannot accept this mincha. This is the way Radak Sofman views it, and I think Radak Sofman is basically continuing the Radak who already spoke about accepting the man and his mincha, or not accepting the man and his mincha. So now, if we understood what was wrong about the menachot, we'll continue to the anger of Cain. So Vayichar leCain mod vayiplu panav. Why are you so angry? And here we reach Pasuk Zayin, which is a very difficult Pasuk. Since the Pasuk is so difficult to understand, I wanted to suggest to read it in this way. I added to the Pasuk the language of the new generation, using not only words or simple signs of a dat, a question mark, or so, but I added these icons here. Hashem tells it, Halo in teitiv se'et. If you improve, se'et, like noseh avon v'fesha. Hashem says, I will take away from you, laset, to pick up. I'll take away from you your sin. If you improve. If you improve, I'll forget about the korban, this wrong korban. Ve'im lo teitiv, but if you don't improve, lapetach chatat ovetz. The sin is sitting there at the entrance of your house, waiting for you. Ve'elecha tshukato. The sin is looking for you. The sin is waiting for you. He wants to harm you. But you control the sin. You can control it. It depends upon you. So on one hand, atatim shorbu, you can control it. But you need to know, if you do not improve, the sin is there waiting for you. And it will sort of jump up on you at the moment it can. Now, what is this sin that Cain needs to improve from? It seems to be the relationship to Hashem, right? He had the wrong relationship to Hashem. I'm afraid of him, so therefore I'm giving him the least of korban. Just give him something and let's finish with this. But I think it's much more than that. And if we continue to read what happens later on in the story, the relationship between Cain and Hevel, which is a man-to-man relationship, it's not a man and God relationship, it seems to be sort of maybe something totally different, because we dealt now with the wrong attitude of Cain towards Hashem. But the next step is the wrong attitude of Cain towards his brother. What's the relationship between the two? So one option we saw before, the artist who drew the picture that we saw before claimed basically that Cain is jealous of Hevel, and maybe because he's jealous of him, because of the mincha, which was accepted, therefore he murders him. And then it basically deals only with relationship, with one issue here. But I want to claim there's some other relationship between these two parts of the story. Let's see the next part of the story, the murder, the first murder of a brother in history. And then we'll try to understand what Hashem tells him here, im teitiv set, v'im lo teitiv, etc., and to understand the entire story and what's happening here. And here we reach Pesuk Chet. Cain says something to Hevel. We don't know exactly what. Back here is some suggestion. We won't go to different suggestions of what exactly he says. But Vayehi v'yotam basadeh, vayakom Cain el Hevel achiv vayankem. Cain gets up, goes to Hevel, and he murders him. Why? Why does he murder him? So one option is, as we said, he's jealous of him because of the beginning of the story, and therefore he murders him. That's one good option. I'll suggest right away something else. Let's continue to Pesuk Tet and Yud, just another few Pesukim ahead. Vayomer Hashem el Cain, Ei Hevel achicha, where's Hevel your brother? I don't know. Am I the guard? Am I the keeper of my brother? Am I my brother's keeper? I'm not. And this statement, am I the keeper of my brother? It is a terrible sentence, terrible statement. How can one say that? It's something so simple for us that shomer achi anochi. I am the keeper of my brother. I even remember as a child, I was maybe 10, 11, 12 years old, I don't remember exactly how old I was, that there was a lot of things going on about the Soviet Jews, trying to save them, the Jews in the Soviet Union. And what was done then, I remember there was some organization in Yerushalayim which called itself Shomer Achi Anochi. They erased the letter Hey, Ha Shomer, which is a question. Am I the keeper of my brother? And they left the word Shomer Achi Anochi. I am the keeper of my brother. So just erasing one letter changes it from a statement of a question, a rhetorical question that means I don't care at all, to a statement of I care so much for my brother. But that to Cain, who did not care for his brother, why doesn't he care for his brother? How can this happen? What is this that one does not care for his brother? How does this happen? what leads him not to care for his brother? Now, I think that if we try to understand what leads him to not care for his brother, we must go back to what Hashem told him before. If you improve, I'll forgive you. If you don't improve, you will sin again. But what's the connection between the sin towards Hashem and the sin towards his brother? What I want to claim is that there's some basic misunderstanding of Cain about life. And what he does not understand about life leads him to two different sins, a sin towards God and a sin towards his brother. But it's the same misconception. The conception is Cain. His name means kinyan, possession. What he has in mind is, what do I possess? What do I own? And what I own is mine. No one will get anything from it, and no one will harm what I worked for. So when I need to bring a mincha to Hashem because I'm afraid of him, I won't give him from my fruit. It doesn't say that he brought mi perotav, mi pri ha'adama, from the fruit of the land. By Hevel it says sono, from his son, not by Cain. Cain did not bring from his own, because what he worked for is his. As we saw earlier, Rashal Hirsch says that sometimes people who work so hard in the land, it demands a strong devotion to work, and that strong devotion turns the man and the work into one. And what he gains from work is part of what he is. He cannot differentiate between his work and himself. And therefore, anything he gains is part of who I am. I won't give anything away from what I am. So he won't give to Hashem a great mincha, but just mipri ha'adama, not the firstborn, not the fat, not from what I worked on. I'll just give him something. And when Cain meets Hevel, basadeh, in the field, vayehi biyotam basadeh, we're told here in Pasuk Chet, when they meet in the field, what's going on there in the field? The field is a place that both of them are working at. Cain is probably working very hard to grow his crops. And he suddenly sees Hevel coming to the field, not on his own, but coming with some goats, some sheep, and they are eating anything that grows there. And Cain is afraid. What's going to happen in just a moment? Hevel's goats are going to eat my crops. That's the Vayehi Biotam Basadeh, the description of the Tanakh, of the location of the murder, is not necessary. We don't really care about where it happened. But the description of the location is much more than a description of just location. It's Basadeh, in the field. This is a statement about the reason for the murder, not only about the location of the murder. The reason is Basadeh. They are both in the Sadeh. Radak says something about it close to what I'm saying now. We won't read the Radak inside, but he said something similar to this. That they're both there. Each one is doing his work there. But doing their work there is the reason for the murder. Cain is afraid about his possession. I worked so hard for months to grow these crops, and these sheep might eat it. So he murders his brother because the kinyan, the possession. And then he says, am I my brother's keeper? I don't care about it. I care about myself. I care about my crops, about my work, about what I possess. I don't care about him. And that's what Hashem basically told him earlier. And just going back to this point, If you improve in what? That's just improving the way you view God. But more than that, you improve in the way you view yourself, in the way you view life. If you view life as possessing, gaining more, and working so hard, the strong devotion to work that I lose my life. I lose the time for, as we saw earlier, Rashad is talking about Arachim Elokim ve'enoshim, human and divine values. I have no time for that because I need to gain more and more and more. So that's imrotative. That means you do not improve. And if you don't improve, this basic attitude of life is the chet. That's the chet. It's sitting there, waiting for you. It will jump at you again in life. So once this attitude caused you to bring a wrong mincha to Hashem, and the second time, the same attitude led you to murder your brother. But Hashem says, "Vatatim shorbu," you can control it if you choose to control it. If you don't choose to control it, if this is your attitude to life, it will jump at you again. You'll get into trouble again. There's no way to get out of it. Unless you decide to change something so basic about the way you view life. So Kain basically means kinyanut, this point of possessing. And it leads to two things. It leads to this wrong attitude towards Hashem, and to bringing the minimal mincha possible, and it leads to yachas meuvat la'ach, to this wrong relationship towards his brother, to the murdering of his brother because of rechush, because of his property. But these two things led him to lose the relationship to Hashem. As we see, right after this, Hashem punishes him, and Navanatye ba'aretz. And he says, Cain says, I need to hide from you, Hashem. I lost my relationship to you. Cain is crying about it. And obviously he lost the relationship to his brother. He has no brother. But part of this tragedy is that when this is the choice in life, many times the man even loses what he worked for. He worked so hard for the land, and his punishment is na vanad tiye ba'aretz. You cannot stay in one place. You need to run from place to place. Now, he works in agriculture. The only way he can work is if he remains in the same place for a few months. He can plow, he can plant, he can grow things, he can collect them when everything is grew nicely. You need a few months in the same place. But na vanati ba'aretz, you need to travel from place to place. You cannot remain at the same location for too long. So he even lost what he worked so hard for. So not only that he lost his relationship to Hashem, he lost also the relationship to his brother, and he even lost what he worked so hard to gain, and he was willing to give away these relationships for his possession, but he lost even that. Now, this reminds me of a mechilta, an interesting mechilta, which is a bit ironic, but it says something about certain situations in life. And the mechilta midrash here about Yetziat Mitzrayim, about the Egyptians in Yetziat Mitzrayim, and I want to relate it to Cain in our story. The mechilta says, Mashal lima davar domeh. Le'echad she'amar le'avdo, some master told his servant, Tzeh ve'aveh li dag min hashuk. Go and buy some fish from the market. Yatza ve'aveh lo dag min hashuk mav'ish. He went and he bought fish from the market, but this was fish that had a bad smell. Amarlo, the master was very angry about it, so he told his servant, Big Zera, I'm going to punish you now. or tochal hadak, your punishment will be or eating the fish, or tilke mea makot, 100 makot, you're going to be loke, or titeni mea mane, pay me 100 mane, a lot of money. Now this servant, well, he doesn't have too much money, and obviously also doesn't want to be beaten up. So he says, Amano, you know what? I'll eat this terrible fish, this stinking fish. What can I do? It's better than the other two punishments. התחיל לאכול, לא הספיק לגמור. עד שאמר, הריני לוקה. He started eating, but the fish was so bad, he couldn't finish this fish. And he said, you know what? Beat me, 100 malkot. Lakashishim, he was beaten up 60 times. It was so painful. Lo הספיק לגמור עד שאמר, הרי נותן מהמנה. He said, I can't bear these beating, the fact that you're beating me up. It hurts me so much. 60 was too much. I can't get any more. I'll pay you 100 mane. נמצא אוכל את הדג ולוקה ונותן מהמנה. So what happened at the end was that this servant was punished with all three punishments. He also ate most of the fish. He also was beaten up, and he also paid the money. The Mechilta says, כך נעשה למצרים, לקו ושילחו וניטל ממונם. The Egyptians who refused to let us out of Egypt, they were also beaten up by the Makot Mitzrayim, the 10 Makot. Veshilchu, they let us out of Egypt. Venital mamonam, they also lost their money. The Midrash here talks about the matanot that they gave us before we left Egypt, and about after Kriyat Yam Suf, the Midrash that says that all the gold and silver that the Egyptian soldiers had upon them was polluted from the water, and the people, Israel, got all this money. The Midrash says this about the Egyptians. I want to say the same thing about Cain. Cain was told after his first sin, Im teitiv se'et. If you change your attitude, I'll forgive you. One thing you already were punished about. Your korban was not accepted. But that can be the only punishment if you choose to change. Oh, if you don't choose to change, so there's another sin, terrible sin of killing your brother. And then you lose your brother, and you lose at the end your land. You lose everything. Now, talking here about Cain and Hevel, we spoke mostly about the word Cain, the name Cain, and what this name has the deeper meaning of kinyan or kinyanut, of possessiveness. I want also to say something about the word Hevel. Hevel reminds us, I think, immediately of one book in Tanakh, of Kohelet. Kohelet, Shlomo HaMelech says, Havel avalim hakol havel. Everything is Hevel. Now, what's the meaning of Hevel? I think most translations translate it as vanity, something which has no value, which has nothing within it. Hevel is emptiness. Ramban, who wrote a drasha on Megillat Kohelet, asks a question in his drasha. And he says, how can Shlomo HaMelech say that everything in the world is Hevel? It's all vanity, has no value. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. We just read in Sefer Bereshit, בראשית ברא אלוקים את השמיים ואת הארץ, והנה טוב, והנה טוב, וירא אלוקים כי טוב, וירא אלוקים כי טוב, ונתן טוב מאוד. Hashem says the world is great. How can Shlomo HaMelech come and say, has no meaning, has nothing within it? It's nothing. And the Ramban says the way to understand it is to understand the word Hevel in a different way. Hevel is also the steam we let out of our mouth when we breathe, when it's cold outside. And so when it's cold outside and we let the hot air out of our mouth, we see this steam coming out. This steam disappears really fast, just takes a few seconds and it's not there anymore. In Hebrew, this steam is called Hevel. Hevel hapeh, the steam of the mouth. Now, Ramban says the meaning of hevel is something which is temporary. The hevel of the peh is something temporary. We can see it, and just 2 seconds later, it disappears. And Ramban says, Shlomo Melech is not saying that what we have in the world is useless, it's emptiness, it has no value. It's a great world, but it's temporary. And Shlomo is not trying to say that the world is bad, that there's nothing good about the world. He's just saying is, all these great things Shlomo Melech has, and he's a big king in Yerushalayim, Shlomo Melech is looking at it, and Shlomo says, this is temporary. I have it for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years maybe. But that's it. It's gone at the end. I'm gone at the end. And it's not evaluating it as bad, but it's just saying it's temporary. Now, this reminds me of a story a good friend of mine told me, and some of you, I think, know this friend and his family. I saw here Harold before. So people from Cleveland will know who I'm talking about. I was in Shlichut in Cleveland over 20 years ago. I had a good friend there. He made Aliyah meanwhile, Dr. Howie Oster. And I remember Howie Oster, he's a doctor today in Ichilov, I think. He told me that his grandparents grew up, I think, in Germany, if I remember correctly. And in 1938, if I again remember correctly, the story that I heard from him more than 20 years ago, the idea of the story is sitting in my mind because it was very important for me. The details I'm not sure about. But his grandparents grew up in Europe, they lived in Europe, I think again it was Germany, and 1938 they felt that this is the end, that's it, they must escape. And they had the ability to escape to the United States. It wasn't easy because they could have escaped but left everything behind. The house, the business, everything they bought in life is just the clothing you have on your body, just to leave Germany now. Do you leave or do you stay? Now, many Jews decided to stay because they felt we are loyal to the Germany. Some of us were soldiers in World War I. No one will do anything bad to us. And Hitler, okay, he's a bad guy, but how bad can he be? No one will let him to do what he's talking about, to murder all the Jews. He also didn't really talk about murdering all the Jews in those years in 1938, not yet. He hinted towards that. He said things about it, but it wasn't so clear. But deeper in many people, it wasn't only difficult to leave a place that you grew up in and that you're loyal to, but also you have so many things here. If you leave everything behind. You have nothing with you. You need to begin life from the beginning. And it was very, very difficult for many people. And many people did not leave. So many people didn't have the ability to leave. Also, he wanted to leave. But Howie told me his grandparents had the ability to leave, and they left. And they saved themselves, and they saved their family. And he said the sentence he heard from his grandfather again and again and again was, all I left behind was only things. It's only things. Now, these things are things his grandfather worked for many years. They were very important for his grandparents. It's not that these things were not important. They were important for them. But at the bottom line is, these were only things. It was a hevel. It's temporary. Not heaven in the meaning of vanity, useless, no importance. It was important for them. They made a big effort to build their house, to buy furniture, to buy clothing, to build a business or whatever they had there. It was important for them. But at the bottom line is, it's only things, it's temporary. So when they had to make the choice, they were able to make the choice because things were set up in mind correctly. Again, unfortunately, many people could not make that choice in those days. But they had the ability and they saved themselves. At this point of it's only things, I think this is the attitude of Hevel, of I work in life, I have the goals, I'm making a big effort in this. I'm building my compassion, working with these animals, compassion towards them, or giving compassion also towards people. It's important for me. I'm trying to make the money in working. I want to make money. I want to make a living. I want to have a good life. But it's temporary. I see things in proportion. And that is the meaning of the name Hevel, the way the Ramban explains Hevel of Megillat Kohelet. So if the idea is the kinyan, the possession, so if I have to possess things, where's the Kadosh Baruch Hu? I'll put him aside. What about my brother? It's not as important. And maybe we can set up this perspective of Cain with a triangle, using the keywords of this chapter. This triangle, the top is the important. From the perspective of Cain, what's up there on top? The crown is on the head of the kinyan, the adama, the land, earth. I'm working. And the word Cain and kinyan appear together 14 times in this passage here of Psukim Aleph up to Tet Zayin in Perek Dalet. This is the keyword, kinyan, Cain. Possessing again and again. That's an important thing. What about Hashem? Not as important. What about Hevel, my brother? That's not as important. And the psukim that maybe reflect this strongly are Mipri ha'adama mincha Hashem. Hevel brings from the fruit of the land, not from his fruit, not from the first fruit, not from the best fruit, from the fruit of the land, mincha Hashem. And the pasuk, when they are actively in the field working, that's when he kills his brother. Again, not only a location, but a reason. The reason of murdering him is that he is basadeh, and he's frightening me. His goats might eat my crops. Since the kinyan is the most important thing, and Hevel, my brother, is not as important, so he murders him. And that's what Hashem tells him, in Teitiv Se'et. Many times, some basic misconception about life leads us to wrong actions, whether it's towards a Kadosh Baruch Hu or towards our brother Jew. And I think this is maybe the picture of the story of Cain. I will give a hint to a tikkun, to Avraham Avinu, who changes this. This needs a full shoe on its own, but I think Avraham flips this triangle. And he puts Hashem and his brother on the top. And Kai, the kinyan, is important. And Avraham is a rich man. And he cares for his property and for things he owns. And he's happy that he has the money that he makes. But that's not as important. Where does he flip this triangle? First of all, I think when Hashem is up on top and everything else is under that, meaning saying that Basara Nisyonot Nitnasa Avraham Avinu, and the different Nisyonot are leaving, first of all, Haran, leaving his family, leaving a good life he has there in Haran, and leaving to the unknown land. He has no idea what's going to happen there. But Hashem said, so I'm leaving everything behind, and I'm changing my life. So Hashem is up on top. And where do we see Avraham came for his brother? So the brother, I mean his nephew, Lot. Lot, his nephew, is called in the Tanakh also Achiv, the brother of Avraham. Because Avraham cares for Lot like a brother. So when Lot is in trouble and he's taken into captivity by the 4 kings who conquer the 5 kings of Sodom and Amorah and the whole area there, Avraham risks his life for saving Lot, his brother. So Avraham, who comes in another 2 parashot and Lech Lecha, I think in many ways he's changing the sins of Bereshit and Noach and giving us a positive perspective of what's right, what are the values, what do we sacrifice our life for, and he flips this triangle and reverses the values and sets up Hashem and Achva, the belief and the brotherhood, as important, and the Kinyan, which is also important for Abraham, but in proportion. It's much less than the belief in Hashem and then the brotherhood. So we spoke mostly about Cain and Hevel, and just a few words also about later on Abraham. And that's our fishu for today. And if anyone wants to ask or to add something, bevakasha. Okay, so have a nice day. I hope next year will be great, and litrot and some other opportunity that I hope to join you. Litrot.
Yefer koach.
Baruch tiyeh, toda.